Did you already do it, Terry?
We're live.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our very first Who Do You Think You Are? Hangout on Air after the show conversation. My name is Jen Baldwin. I'm one of your hosts tonight. I'm a co-host of Gen Chat, also the owner of Ancestral Journeys and Conference Keeper, and I'm the Director of Operations for the In-Depth Genealogist. I'm just going to go quickly through our panel and introduce everybody. When I introduce them, I will click on their name. Uh-oh, looks like we lost Cindy, but I'm sure she'll be back. Lovely technology. There she is. So first with us is Jennifer Alford. She is also part of our In-Depth Genealogist team, and she runs the genealogy company. And next to Jennifer Alford, we have Megan Smolyanek, who I'm sure you are all familiar with. She is a genealogy guru, and Who Do You Think You Are? Guest experts for the show on several episodes. We're excited to have her with us tonight. Terry O'Connell is the next person to introduce. She is also a Gen Chat host with Tracy My Family, and she is the executive director of the In-Depth Genealogist. And then lastly, we have Cindy Freed, who is one of the writers for the In-Depth Genealogist. She actually specializes in Civil War history, so we brought her on. And we're also expecting Thomas McKenty, the genealogy ninja, to join us this evening, so he's just running a little behind. But we'll go ahead and get started. We're talking tonight about the episode of Who Do You Think You Are with Kelly Clarkson that aired on TLC on July 23rd. And we're just going to dive right into our conversation. We wanted to kind of start with the idea of Kelly's reaction, her emotions to the show, and how she portrayed herself so naturally during the episode. And we'll just start with Terry on that. Terry, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, as you watched the seasons unfold before, you can tell some of them, they were interested but maybe not as excited. And I think with every step of the process she went through on this journey, she was extremely excited for every piece of information that she found.
Anybody else?
It was refreshing to see that because, like Terry said, so many people just feign an interest. But her reaction when they talked about her Civil War ancestor becoming a prisoner of war or his escape, I mean, that was genuine emotion, genuine surprise, and it was really, really neat to watch.
Yeah, I thought so too. Actually, it was interesting to watch some of that unfold. I had a lot of commonalities with her story, so it was kind of a neat to see such a human element to it. Megan, what did you think of Kelly Clarkson tonight?
I had the same reaction. I thought her reactions were really genuine. And I think one of my favorite moments was toward the end when she went up to the gravesite and said, "Hey, I'm your 3 times great-granddaughter. What's up?" Oh, you can't rehearse something like that. That's how you know it's for real, you know?
Yeah. And I'd have to imagine that that's a first take kind of thing. That's not something they'd reshoot.
That's a producer's dream kind of thing.
Right. Right.
But I think very, very real.
Yeah, I also really liked her comment about when she found out that he was a sheriff, that, you know, he's a sheriff like Tombstone. I just thought that was really awesome. Jen Alford, what did you think of Kelly tonight?
Well, I really enjoyed just her reactions to everything, and I could totally relate with a lot of her comments, like, you know, that this has really lit a fire in her, and how wonderful it is that she can get to this information. You know, that was just like, you know, I can totally relate to getting totally hooked on genealogy. You know, I think all of us genealogists have that fire, and hopefully this is something that, you know, she's going to continue to have interest in, and hopefully help her relate with her mother, who obviously had a strong interest as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think her emotional reaction can go in the other direction as well. And she was obviously really excited about what she was learning, but at the same time, she kept indicating how proud she was of her ancestor, and especially at the beginning when she realized that he was a Union veteran versus a Confederate. And I think that brings up some interesting points too. As we research, obviously we learn some things that we may not obviously like about our ancestors, kind of the black sheep style that Terry's so familiar with. But in terms specifically of the Civil War, Cindy, do you have thoughts that you can kind of share with us on the idea of her pride of a Union veteran versus a Confederate one?
Well, I sort of had some mixed emotions on that because she was so genuinely happy that her ancestor was a Union veteran. But, I know there's a lot of people watching the show that have Confederate ancestors as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand, as you're saying, worrying about the sensitivity issue there and having a Confederate ancestor, that these are your people. And for good or for bad, no matter what their stance was in life, they are your people.
Oh, uh-oh. That's not good. So Cindy's having some technical problems, so we'll just continue that thought. Megan, what do you think about all of that, the issue of researching someone who isn't necessarily your dream ancestor?
Personally, I think that the so-called black sheep ancestors are some of the most fun because they give you a great story. So I actually love it when I trip across them. But I have to say, in my book, a Confederate ancestor is nothing like a black sheep ancestor. It's just an ancestor who served in the Confederacy. That's all it is. She happened to bring a certain perception to it. And I did notice on Twitter there are some people who are not happy with that perception. Everybody's entitled, to their own opinions. But our ancestors are just like us, meaning some of them are very noble and all that, and some of them are just total schmucks. They are worthy, they're good. You're going to find out what you're going to find out. And it's nice that she was very happy with what she discovered about him.
And that, it kind of leads us to another concept. There's so much more than just the Civil War that we research, obviously. So let's broaden that topic a little bit. And how do we relay that lesson to researching maybe World War II, Nazi Germany, or some of the other more controversial topics? Terry, I know you've had a lot of experience in this, and you wrote the Legacy Quick Guide on researching the forbidden, which I think is a fascinating topic. So what are your thoughts on the forbidden?
Well, I kind of agree definitely with Megan. They bring such stories into your family that no matter what they did, like Cindy said, they're still your people. You've learned something from what they've done, whether you know it or not. As I look back in my family and the things that they've done and the stories that I've found, you laugh, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I came from that, but there's always a learning with it.
Jen, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I think it's interesting. I have Confederate ancestors. Mm-hmm. My family was from Arkansas. They all were down there in the South. And even so, I still want to know their stories because, you don't know what their lives were like until you know what drove them, what was their community like, what did the people in their area believe. I'm a Jewish person. I believe, what happened during the Holocaust was a horrible thing. But I also understand what the culture was like at that time. And the Jews were a major scapegoat. And, so of course there would be a lot of hatred and horrible negative things that happened as a result of those feelings perpetuating. So, regardless of, if they're on the good side or the bad side or whatever, it's their story, it's what their lives were like. And I think that can be just as educational as anything.
Yeah, I agree. It was interesting for me to watch because I actually had ancestors on both sides of the war. I'm sure there's many people out there that are like that. And I actually had direct ancestors fight each other in the Second Battle of Manassas. Their units were lined up against each other.
Oh, wow.
So thankfully both of them survived because here I am. But it's always interesting to research the Confederate side of the war. Those have been some of my best finds, I think, and some of the most challenging ones for me in terms of record sets. So that's always been an interesting thing to pursue. So a kind of a unique piece of history. Any other thoughts on that perspective from anybody? No? Everybody feels pretty good about things? So that leads us kind of into I'll try to segue a little bit into the Andersonville section of the show, which I thought was fascinating. I had two ancestors that were in Andersonville. They both survived, thankfully, and it was really neat for me to see it. I've never been able to go down there, although I would love to. But we did actually try to contact Andersonville, the National Historic Site. That's run through the National Park Service, and they responded with an email. They weren't able to join us tonight, but Terry has a little information on that.
Oh, give me 1 second, because it's been blocking up, so I don't know if I can pull it open.
Okay, well, I'll just do a quick summary. They were able to respond back via email, and they gave us some great research suggestions. Our favorite part actually was saying, we do not know who your Andersonville prisoner, survivor married 20 years down the road, which we thought was pretty funny for them to be able to. They've actually been asked that, obviously been asked that several times. So that was kind of neat. But they did give us several different websites to utilize, which some of us I think are pretty familiar with, the Civil War Soldiers and Sailors database, etc. And we'll probably put that in a blog post here on the In-Depth Genealogist website fairly soon. And then
Actually, I did talk to them and get permission to use everything that they've given us.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. And then I know Cindy had some resources she wanted to share as well on researching some of the Civil War history.
Oh, yes. If people are interested in researching their Civil War ancestor, along with starting out with the National Park System's database, the Soldiers and Sailors database, there's also a couple of other places that you could look in researching your ancestor and trying to get a little more than just names and dates.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Cindy, we're losing you just a little bit. So maybe we can come back to that. I'm wondering if any of you have had the opportunity to dig into any kind of specifically Southern research. Have you discovered any resources or anything that kind of relate to the show in the sense that she was in Georgia quite a bit and that area of the country? Does anybody have anything to contribute in that direction?
I'm sorry?
Are you back, Cindy?
Cindy, yeah, you broke up on us a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just kept talking, too.
So we'll go back to, oh no! Cindy's just having a horrible time tonight. That's too bad. So any Southern research in our families besides my Alabama connection? No, nobody? Okay.
No, I have Alabama and Arkansas, but I haven't really had a chance to dig into the Civil War aspect of it. It's been more just basic, first marriage, death, the very basic stuff.
Right.
I'll just jump in with one little tip. I don't have any Southern ancestry myself, but I do research all over the place. And since we were talking about the Confederacy earlier, everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people know how to get a hold of the pension files for Civil War soldiers. And by the way, working on TV shows, you always look for pension files because that's where you find great stories.
Right.
You always hope, something like tonight is exactly what you hope for.
Right.
Confederate ones are a little more distributed, so they sometimes take a little more digging. Of course, you can use fold3.com. But one little tip is that some of the state archives have Confederate pension files, or if not pension files, service records, some sort of different Confederacy records. And so one thing you might want to try doing is just a simple Google of the state and their archives, and then go looking through what's available online.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great suggestion, Megan. Thank you. And I actually have found one of my ancestors applied for a pension through the state of Alabama. So the National Archives didn't have his records, but the state did. And I actually also found several articles on him through Confederacy magazine, which was published for several years after the war, and it included his obituary, which was pretty neat. So
there you go. Yeah.
So Cindy, we'll go back to you for just a second. Try this again.
I was going to add too, along with what Megan was saying about the Confederate pension files, the National Archives has a list of the southern states and who to contact, where to contact to check on pension files. They have, each state is listed. There is the website as well as the address and the phone number. So that's all listed out if you would look on the National Archives website. But there are other places as well that you could look. There's the Confederate military history. If you Google that online, Archives has it. There are several online book places where you can find some of this information. As I say, like the Confederate military history or the official records of the Northern and Southern armies in the War of the Rebellion. There are things like that that you can look up online so that in researching your Civil War ancestor.
Excellent. Good suggestions. Thank you. And did you have anything else that you wanted to throw out there since you got cut off a couple times? Or you good? I don't want you to.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Just wanted to remind people too, if you're watching on the YouTube side, you can leave comments or ask questions of the people that are on the panel this evening. Terry's monitoring that for us. So if you have anything that you want us to address while we're on the show, please feel free to do that. I'm not sure how many people we have over on YouTube, but hopefully someone's out there is watching. So let's talk a little bit about her, the rest of her show. We've talked quite a bit about her Civil War connections, but she also had her ancestor as a state senator. He was fighting for women's rights and temperance movement. And so what are your thoughts on that? Terry, do you want to start us off?
Oh, I was looking for your comments.
Oh, sorry.
You always grab me when I look away.
I do. Yeah.
Go back to your question because I was looking.
We're going to switch the conversation to kind of the rest of the show in terms of his work as a state senator and towards the end there. So if you have any comments on that.
I just thought it was really interesting to see that he was looking after the woman in the world. It was like he wanted to get rid of liquor. There was too much abuse with all the drinking that was going on, and I thought that was a very cool thing to see.
Megan?
I didn't find that a huge surprise myself. I mean, the temperance movement at that time was quite substantial. So it's nice that he was a part of that, and obviously he was a very proactive part of it, having served in the state legislature for Ohio. But I didn't find that quite as astonishing as some folks may have found that. But it's nice that she also, once again, I watched this show through the prism of Kelly's eyes. I just got a kick seeing her reactions and how surprised she was at everything and how delighted she was at everything. And it's just really fun to see those fresh reactions,
Yeah, definitely.
I agree.
Kind of takes us all back to those very first days when we were learning all of these wonderful things for the first time. Jen, what did you think about all of that, the state senate section?
Well, I really enjoyed that because being here in Ohio, right outside of Columbus, it's like, oh, I've been there. I know that. So that was always kind of neat, just to see all the shots of Columbus and everything. But I thought it was very cool that, not only was he, an escapee from the prison and went back home and eventually became sheriff and, that he continued on to be a state senator. I could definitely see why Kelly would be very proud of that. I'd love to find that in my own family history. So it was very neat that, she got to experience that. And she definitely showed her pride in that. So that was cool.
Yeah, I have to admit I'm a little jealous of Ohio records because I had actually my Civil War ancestor, my brick wall, was a state senator for the state of Nebraska after the war, and their records are not nearly as good as Ohio's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I haven't been able to find that much on his terms, so it was pretty neat to watch that. Cindy, what did you think about that section of the show?
I learned from that because I don't have any experience researching a state senator or anything like that. So, there were some tips there. Go to your state historical genealogy society. And the one thing, everything they pulled out were newspapers.
Yeah,
so
I noticed that.
Back again to using your newspapers as a resource.
Yeah, I think that brings up a very valid point, too, because what they have in the state senate may have led them to those newspapers, or however they got through that process of researching. But it was interesting that it was the newspapers that they used to show her the story.
I'll tell you, I think what may have happened is that it could have been the county history that they found that led to the others.
Right. Yep, that's a good point. And then let's talk a little bit about how we felt about TLC's take on the show. Everybody was kind of concerned about what was going to happen when it moved over to TLC and went off kind of the mainstream channels. And so what did everybody think about TLC's production capabilities tonight? We got one thumbs up.
Yeah, they did good. I was pleasantly surprised.
Good.
I was too. I enjoyed it thoroughly and thought they did a great job.
I did notice they did send out a tweet at some point that said that some of the DVR settings had gotten it wrong. They were saying it was only 30 minutes, but it really was a full-length show, which was good to see. And of course, we knew that already from the iTunes broadcast. But Terry, what did you think of TLC's production?
I think they did a really great job with it. If my memory serves me correct, I think we saw a lot more records in this episode tonight than we did probably in any of the other ones. Before they were, a brief glimpse, or we're going to look here, and that was really it. But tonight, there were so many different things that she got to see, hold, read, right. I think they really did an awesome job with that.
I did like, too, that they made her try and translate some of the old handwriting. That was nice.
Yeah,
that cracked me up.
Megan, what did you think of TLC tonight?
It struck me as quite consistent with the previous versions. When I say versions, I mean not just the NBC version, but also the versions we've seen in other countries.
Right.
The only thing that was a little bit of surprise is that it was purely domestic. But also, I would say that it stayed on one ancestor. Because, I thought at one point that they might kind of veer off and go on to another story. But aside from that, it felt very familiar, to the usual style. And I like that.
Right. And since we have you with us tonight, we'll pick on you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to work on one of these shows. Because I'm sure everybody wants to know.
Well, I get all the same questions all the time. It's like you think. A lot more research is done than ever makes it to air, of course. Right. You research the celebrity's entire family tree, and hundreds of man-hours often go into that research. So what you see on TV is just, the proverbial tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. Who do you think you are? Well, tonight I think it was very apparent, but in the past people have thought, oh, okay, is this are the celebrities primed or whatever? They're not. They really don't know where they're going or what they're going to learn. So they genuinely are. It is essentially engineered so that they're on their own journey of discovery. And they do have to piece together the pieces themselves, just like you saw Kelly. And I thought she did a really good job reading all the old handwriting.
Yeah, I thought she did too, yeah.
For a long time. So, that gives you a little bit of a take of it. And I'll just tackle the one question I get all the time is, I'm sorry, I don't see Who Do You Think You Are ever doing average Joes as opposed to celebrities. But of course, the good news is we have other shows that are going to be tackling that. So.
Right. Yeah, I think we're all excited for Genealogy Roadshow on PBS. So that'll be
Finding Your Roots on PBS.
Oh, that's right.
Average Joe next year as well. They've done that in the past. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. I've just been seeing a lot of Genealogy Roadshow tweets, so it's fresh in my brain.
Coming soon, yeah.
Yeah, let's see, I have it written down. September 23rd. Yep, so 3 months from today, 2 months from today. Okay. So, good, so thank you for that. I appreciate your willing to share a little bit with that. It's always fun to see the behind-the-scenes kind of stuff. And I wish Thomas had been able to join, but I did get an email from him saying that he was having complications. So unfortunately, he is not going to make it tonight, which is too bad. And I just lost my train of thought. So Terry, do we have any questions or comments or anything from anybody?
I have not seen anything come in yet.
Okay, and then I'm just curious if anybody's watching Twitter at all to see if we have anything there.
That I don't have.
The only comment I've seen was asking if anybody else was disappointed that they only focused on one ancestor.
No,
I liked it that they went into so much depth on the one guy.
I think he had so much of a story that it was easy to follow him and stay with him as opposed to, jumping around her tree, going line to line, telling the
Right.
different stories. So I think they did a good job handling it.
Hmm. I
You
thought it was.
mentioned,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Megan.
I was just going to say sometimes too there are logistical concerns that we're not privy to, like especially the celebrities' schedules.
Mhm.
The fact
Right.
that they stayed domestic with her, for example, may have to do with her schedule. Maybe she only had a couple of days to spare.
Right.
And may also be why they chose to focus on one storyline. So there could be some
Right.
very practical considerations as well.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it is touring season, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they obviously filmed during the winter, so who knows what they were doing,
Right,
and what she
exactly.
was doing at that time, just based on her coat. Since, oh, sorry, my cat just attacked his food dish. Okay, that's really startled me. Um, so I'm curious too about how you guys felt about TLC releasing it early on iTunes and Amazon. What did you think about that?
My
I
biggest concern is going to be ratings. How are they looking at their iTunes views as well? Because I don't want to see it go away because everybody watched it on iTunes and didn't watch it live or
Right.
didn't in the first 24 hours that they taped it. So
And I wonder how many of us that watched it on iTunes during the past week also watched it tonight live.
I did.
Yeah.
well, I never watched it on iTunes. I never got around to it, so this was my first time seeing it. Of course, I DVR'd it, so I will watch it what I
Right.
missed.
Right.
Well, and then the question comes: are they going to release everybody a week early? Because now I'm going to my phone. Is Christina Applegate ready? When are they going to release it?
Right. Megan, do you have any thoughts on the pre-release?
I was surprised that they did it. And I do think that they get to count iTunes as views. I would be surprised if they continue to do it through the season. For one thing, if they were doing it already, then we should already have access to Christina Applegate at this
Yeah,
point.
that's true. Yeah.
So unless they're messing with the timing. So maybe that was just sort of a one-time thing up front to kind of gin up a little interest to remind people that the series was coming back. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not really sure what the motivation was, but I appreciated it. It was fun to be able to just download it and check it out.
Right.
And I'll tell you, with that teaser with Christina Applegate, if it were available, I'd be downloading it right now because that one's sounding reminiscent of Susan Sarandon. I'm really curious to see it. Sounds like she had
Oh,
a
yeah.
Sarandon there.
Yes.
Right.
See what happened there.
Right.
Right. And Cindy, what about you?
I think that was just a one-time thing as well, to release it early to iTunes, to create some interest and generate hype and everything, because I can't imagine how they could continue with the series and with advertising, getting the monetary support they need to continue the program if people can watch it on iTunes. So I'll just bet that it was, the opening show hype and to generate
Right.
interest.
Right. And what about their social media presence? I actually didn't see a lot from TLC about the show, and I'm wondering if maybe I just missed it, or if you guys kind of had the same impression.
I'll say I looked, I didn't see much from TLC. I did look at Kelly Clarkson's Twitter feed today, and she's tweeted about it a couple times within the past week. I made sure that I included her on a couple of the tweets that I sent out from In-Depth Gen, but, really I didn't see much on social media that wasn't generated by the genealogist.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the show itself tweeted, its Twitter account tweeted, and TLC did. Actually, they were tweeting during the show a little bit. They were mostly kind of doing recounting bits, sort of summaries, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But then again, the show's never really been heavily tweeted by those who put it on. You saw both Lisa Kudrow and Dan Bukatinsky, the executive producers, talking about it beforehand. In fact, it was from Lisa Kudrow that I learned that, check your DVR, because she was putting out the word.
Yeah, that actually might have been.
Online, they had done that thing where they made it look like a different show. I thought I had already taped the whole thing, and no, I only had the first half hour. So thanks, Lisa, for that.
Yeah.
I just saw that Kelly Clarkson did tweet something. She goes, "I'm so happy y'all liked my Who Do You Think You Are episode. All I can say is research your family history."
All
And
right.
then she wrote,
Love it.
"Love this show."
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
That's good. Is it is it at all strange, or is it to be expected that the only people who put it out on social media are genealogists? What do you think?
I think it being on TLC will be interesting going forward because we know this year the celebrities are trending younger. And just following the Twitter feed this evening during the show, it seemed to me like there were a lot more comments from younger people than I've seen in past seasons. And so I think that's a hopeful sign. I think it could start having a larger social media presence because of that.
Right. Anybody else?
I think, too, that, when you're looking at it, Kelly is one of the younger celebrities that they're doing. I don't really know the age range of all of them, but when you look at all of them, she's probably, I would say, the youngest, which might have something to do with it, too.
And it's a different audience, and she's a country star, which is a lot different than some of the other. I think they have one other country singer on this season, but yeah, thank you, Trisha Yearwood. But compared to the Chris O'Donnell episode and the other folks, she's bringing in a different core of fans.
Right, and she's probably still has a lot of her American Idol base that really still follow her from that.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forget about that show. Yeah. Yeah, Cindy, what do you think about all the age range and the social media usage?
Well, I think that Who Do You Think You Are is doing very well in reaching out to Kelly Clarkson, Christina Applegate, Zoe Deschanel. You're going to draw in a younger age group that would probably not tune in if it weren't for those names. So I think that's great. And I also think the genealogy community, I saw, really hit the social media pretty well in covering tonight's show. So with social media doing that and all of us retweeting, I think that we probably spread the word to a lot of people that may not have tuned in either, because they got the message through our tweets and Facebook messages.
I'm hoping someday that the Who Do You Think You Are hashtag will actually start trending on Twitter. I think that would be awesome if that could happen.
That would be neat.
That would be fun. So what about, let's go back to the actual research process that they used. And Terry hit on this a little bit earlier. Did we see a lot of diversity in their record sets that they used?
It seemed like there were a lot of pension file type documents, and then a lot of newspapers.
A lot of newspapers for sure.
I'm trying to think. They didn't really go through any census records or anything like that, which is a little unusual, I thought.
Yeah, just right at the very beginning, I think, when she was with her mom, right?
Oh, that's true.
And I also noticed they didn't pull up Ancestry.com in the middle of the show numerous times like they did in years past. And I wonder about that because they're obviously a major sponsor and they're heavily involved in the production of the show. They have to be. So why didn't they do that this time? It was kind of an interesting...
They pulled it up a few times, but they weren't always saying we're going to Ancestry.com. Because
right.
all of us genealogists watching would go, oh, that's an Ancestry screen.
Right, right.
A lot of the viewers wouldn't know that they were back at Ancestry again, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember from seasons past, it was very obvious zoom in on the iPad that Ancestry.com, and it wasn't quite as in your face this time. In fact, I actually laugh because I know that people on Twitter do a drinking game associated with the show, which I think is really funny. And, they take a drink every time they hear Ancestry or see a commercial, and they were actually talking about how little was being done, and they weren't able to drink as much tonight.
Well, it's not on Friday nights anymore either, so...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's the middle of the week, so they probably shouldn't drink as much anyway.
Makes it very hard to go back to work the next day.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? Hangover, right?
Oh, we just named this show. That's exactly what we're going to call this. That's awesome.
I like it.
Yeah, me too. So the newspaper records we definitely saw a lot of. What else did we notice that was either prevalent in the show or not as prevalent as we would have expected for the topic? Any record sets that you think were not included that maybe should have been or could have been?
You didn't see any vital records at all. I don't recall any vital records.
Yeah, that's true. I don't recall any either.
They didn't call it that, but they did show a county history, a local history.
Yeah.
I kind of wish they had called it what it was, just so new folks watching it would know what to go and ask for. And just to know how widely available they are. You know. I'm trying to think.
Right.
Of it. Yeah. I don't know. Census, pension, newspapers, county history. What else?
I can't think of anything else that they did.
Yeah, I think that was.
You froze up on us just a little bit, Megan.
Oh, okay. I was just rattling off. I can think of 4 records.
Okay, that's all right.
I don't know what else they showed. Beyond those 4, I can't recall.
You know, the one thing I always like to use, especially when I'm researching a war situation or any kind of military engagement, is maps of the battlefield. And it would have been kind of neat to see something related to Andersonville. They did show the photograph of the prisoner of war, and they showed kind of what it was like when the prisoners were actually there. But I'm a big map girl, so I would have liked to see a map in there somewhere.
They did show a map. Remember that fellow named Orr from Old Dominion, when she first went down to Georgia, and they were sitting there the first time before she went out to Andersonville. He pulled out a map on the table and asked her to find Decatur, I think.
That's right. Yeah,
so
you're right.
We did get a little map hit there.
So we got a map. That's good. Yeah, definitely a big fan of maps. In fact, I get made fun of a lot for that. Terry.
She likes them a lot.
I do like maps.
You've got one on the wall behind you.
Yeah, I do, actually. Yeah, it's Bohemia region. Yeah.
There we go.
So in terms of kind of our last couple points here, we talked quite a bit about the research process that they went through, but let's talk a little bit about how we can adapt what we learned tonight from the show to our own personal research. I like the idea of using maps and researching more of like a regimental history when it comes to my military ancestors. So what are the pieces, what are the next steps that you would all take to keep Kelly's story going? Where would you go next with her story? And anybody just shout it out. I know you got to think about it for a minute.
Well, since we're talking Ohio, like was mentioned earlier today, Ohio is a great state for a lot of reasons. The vital records are pretty darn easy to obtain in Ohio, so that would be, you know, probably a few extra details could be easily gained that way.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to pursue the idea of his escape. Where did he go? Is there anything else that could be learned of that period of his life? It probably wasn't a long period, but is there any other details that could be investigated there? That's the mystery, the big question mark for me in that show.
Mm-hmm. And you know, that you could find in like the official records. That would be one of those things where if you went online and looked in the official records, you could find reports regarding that and what messages were sent out in regard to that. So you could find more information on that either through, like we talked earlier, the Confederate military history or the official records.
Mm-hmm. Jen, do you have any thoughts about where you would go next with Kelly's story?
No, not really. Sorry. My brain is reaching, you know, at times.
It's pretty late for some of you guys right now, yeah.
How about Melissa, his wife? Because I want to know if she's the one that got into the whole temperance thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Oh, my cat just came under.
We're all having cat problems tonight.
I closed the door and she still managed to get in.
On a broader scale, not just Kelly's story, but if you were researching just this kind of timeline in general, where would you take your research next if it was just the same kind of storyline, not necessarily this one?
Well, I'm personally a huge fan of city directories and county directories, so I probably would want to find out more about, his family, his descendants, what they ended up doing, for their careers. I love directories.
They are good.
Yeah. I think I would center it on that cemetery that she was at the very end. There were so many members of her family here, and she actually commented on how many people she had there. And there's got to be, a couple of generations at least worth of history just in that one cemetery. So I think that's probably what my next step would be to document that entire location and figure out what their stories are.
Mm-hmm.
Any excuse for a cemetery too, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big cemetery girl. Yeah.
I would be tempted to hit the courthouse because the fact that he was a sheriff and a state senator, I doubt that those were his first exposures, to that kind of world. So I would bet there's more of a paper trail waiting for him at the courthouse. And of course, courthouses are kind of like pension files. They also tend to have stories.
Yeah.
And so if she wanted to continue to round him out as a living, breathing person, I'd go digging at the county courthouses wherever he lived.
And I've got to imagine his fraternal society. There's got to be a fraternal society, at least one in there somewhere. So that's one of my areas of interest. That would be something I would be looking at as well. Which society and how many of his family members were involved and how many of his constituents when he was a state senator were members of the same society, and how all of that political intrigue kind of comes together. Because there's always something.
A man of his prominence probably belonged to the GAR, so that would be so that would be somewhere to look locally in their museum, or to go to the state society to look up the GAR records of the posts that he perhaps belonged to.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Terry, what about you? Where would you go next?
Honestly, I'd like to see it go back more. I would like to see about, his parents. Where did they come from? Or, how far or how long had they been in the States? I like those immigrant stories.
Yeah, they're good. So we've got just enough time left in the show to just kind of get some last thoughts from everybody. Who wants to go first? Don't everybody speak at once.
Well, considering I didn't get to watch it before everybody else, I must say that I really enjoyed watching it and tweeting with everyone and getting their reactions, and they noticed things that I didn't notice and vice versa, and it's just a lot of fun to have that kind of community feeling while you're watching a television show. When I first got into Twitter, I thought it was crazy. I'm like, why would you do that? Why can't you just watch the show? And then I started tweeting, and next thing I knew, I was like, every show. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. So, I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I look forward to doing that again for future episodes. And hopefully I'll be watching it live with everyone else, so that'll be cool.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Gen Chat, too. Yeah. Terry?
I have to agree that I really liked rewatching it, because I did watch it on iTunes last week as it was released, and I did like seeing everybody's reaction to things that happened, like the tombstone comment, and they were talking about, oh my God, what else could this man possibly do? Was he Superman? And like, oh, and then he was senator. So, I'm going to keep out hope that they're going to release Christina Applegate tomorrow for me. I can hope. But if not, I look forward to, definitely watching the series go through the, however many stars they have lined up for this season. I've been on pins and needles since it went off air, and I am so glad to have it back.
Yeah, very much so. Cindy, what about you? Closing thoughts?
I agree with Jen. I really enjoyed watching the show. and with Gen Chat and talking to the others. This is a television show that I would be watching by myself at home. Believe me, nobody
Me too.
nobody else in my house would watch Who Do You Think You Are with me. So it's really nice to watch it with other people that appreciate it, that laugh at the same jokes and whatnot. You know, it's really nice to watch the show with like-minded people. I enjoyed the evening.
Yeah, I have to be honest, I'm on the same page. It's hard to get a 4-year-old to watch a show like this. Yeah, it's a little tough.
It's
Megan,
hard to
what
get a
about-
husband to watch it
Yeah,
with you sometimes.
yeah. He's usually pretty good, but the 4-year-old not so much. Megan, what do you think? Last thoughts.
I think Kelly was a really good season opener.
Yeah.
I thought she was just really personal, engaging, and so down to earth. And for non-genealogists, I think that will have a lot of appeal. And so I thought she was a great sort of setting of the stage for the 7 more episodes that will be coming up this season. And I just really enjoyed watching it. And like I said, I'm really, really curious about Christina now.
Yeah. Well, I obviously enjoyed it as well. Gen Chat's always a lot